Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and submit extraneous materials.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On January 13th of this year, the ATF finalized its unconstitutional rule pertaining to firearms with stabilizing braces. Under this new ATF rule, any pistol-braced firearm would be considered an illegal short-barreled rifle, subjecting these firearms to draconian regulations under the NFA, the National Firearms Act of 1934, and turning millions of law-abiding gun owners into criminals literally overnight. Unelected anti-gun bureaucrats informed law-abiding gun owners possessing pistols with these braces attached that they will have only 120 days to register them once the rule is published in the Federal Register. This 120-day amnesty window started yesterday, January 31st. As we have seen across the world time and time again, what comes before gun confiscation? Gun registration. That's right. That's exactly what ATF is now demanding. But for stabilizer brace owners who do not wish to register their firearms, the ATF provides 4 alternatives. The first, turn in the entire firearm with the attached stabilizing brace to the ATF. That means forfeiting your firearm. The second, destroy the whole firearm. Again, another forfeiture of your firearm. The third, convert the pistol brace into a long-barreled rifle that does not require registration, but is also much more difficult to use with a brace. Or number 4, permanently remove and dispose of or alter the stabilizing brace from the firearm so that it cannot be reattached. If gun owners who possess braced firearms refuse to register, destroy, turn in, or alter their firearm after this 120-day window, they face National Firearms Act violations, felony violations, including hefty fines up to $250,000 and up to 10 years in prison for having an unregistered short-barreled rifle. In other words, the ATF's rule turns law-abiding gun owners into criminals, into felons for simply doing nothing. That's right. If they do nothing, then after 120 days, they are in felony violation of ATF's reinterpreted law, all for simply maintaining their Second Amendment freedoms. So what exactly are these alleged hazardous stabilizing braces? A pistol brace, also known as a stabilizing brace, is simply an accessory that is attached to the rear of a large firearm in order to anchor the gun to the shooter's arm to better stabilize it, allowing them to more accurately be shot one-handed, just like what you see right here. This is a stabilizing brace. These braces were actually designed to help disabled veterans enjoy the sport of shooting. In fact, as a federal firearms licensee, my company has sold many of these pistol brace firearms to assist disabled veterans so they can improve their shooting capabilities and their accuracy. Unfortunately, these beneficial braces have faced uniformed and unwarranted backlash from unelected bureaucrats for years. In 2012, the ATF provided a letter determining that pistol braces were legal to use and to shoulder. This decision was then reversed 3 years later by the ATF in 2015, in which stabilizing braces became illegal to shoulder, turning braced firearms into unregistered short-barreled rifles. Now, the braces remained legal if held at arm's length, but illegal if brought back to the shoulder. How does that make any sense? This flip-flopped again in 2017, when stabilizing braces were once more determined to be legal to shoulder by the ATF, as long as the original design of the brace remained unmodified. And now here we are in 2023, as brace pistols are vilified yet again, declared by the ATF to be unregistered short-barreled rifles, requiring registration, and their owners classified as felons if they simply do nothing. Clearly, as in most cases of unconstitutional gun control, unelected bureaucrats who have little to no knowledge of firearms or respect for the Second Amendment rights are steamrolling ahead with unlawful restrictions, which will impact, estimates say, anywhere from 3 million to up to 40 million firearms across the country. Why? To advance the less dangerous dream of disarming our nation and dismantling our Second Amendment rights. That's what gun control is all about. The ultimate goal is an unarmed and subjugated America. I can assure gun owners across this great nation that I and Second Amendment-loving Republican colleagues will do everything in our power to never allow that to happen. We are fighting this, and we are not going to give up. Congress cannot allow the ATF to brazenly disregard both our Constitution and Congress's role, its sole role in legislation, its legislative authority. Now, I don't know if ATF Director Dettelbach needs a copy of the Constitution to revisit the explicit language of the Second Amendment or the direct powers granted to the three branches of government, but the last time I checked, only Congress has the authority to make laws. Let me say that again. Congress makes laws, not unelected anti-gun bureaucrats at the ATF or any other part of the executive branch for that matter. Yet, given the ATF's severely misguided decision to advance its unconstitutional pistol brace rule, I'm actively leading the fight to stop this grave injustice. We have three key tools available to us to fight the ATF's tyranny in Congress. The first is H.R. 646, the Stop Harassing Owners of Rifles Today Act, or the SHORT Act, which I reintroduced yesterday with Senators Roger Marshall and John Kennedy. This legislation repeals the elements of the National Firearms Act, thereby prohibiting the ATF from registering and banning pistols with stabilizing braces. The second element is a joint resolution of disapproval under the Congressional Review Act, which we will introduce in a matter of days to block the ATF's rule from infringing on Americans' Second Amendment rights. Congressman Richard Hudson, our conference NRCC chair, has joined me in co-leading this in the House, while Senators John Kennedy and Roger Marshall will introduce the resolution in the Senate. And the third way that we can fight this here in Congress is through the power of the purse. As we write the ATF's appropriations for fiscal year 2024, we can prevent taxpayer dollars from funding this backdoor gun control through what's called a limitation amendment. As a new member on the Appropriations Committee and the Commerce, Justice, and Science Subcommittee, I look forward to assisting in this effort. With these three initiatives, we can work together to stop the ATF's unconstitutional overreach. You know, it would be better if the ATF simply decided to rescind the pistol brace rule so we would not have to take these permanent measures. But we are fully prepared to do so if they will not rescind it. Now, I'm proud to have several of my colleagues here tonight to expose the ATF's unconstitutional rule, as well as to highlight how Congress can stop this latest form of gun control from infringing on law-abiding gun owners' Second Amendment freedoms. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 3 minutes to my good friend from New Jersey, Mr. Van Drew.
I thank the gentleman for doing this today, and I thank him for his lead in the fight. Yesterday, I stood on this floor fighting to protect Americans' First Amendment rights. Today, I'm standing here fighting to protect Americans' Second Amendment rights. God help our Constitution. Congress has afforded far too much deference to unelected D.C. bureaucrats in federal agencies. And it is time, with our majority, to rein in that extreme power. The left has talked about taking your gas stoves away, has censored your speech, and now the ATF, under the guidance of this administration, is coming to take away millions of pistols from law-abiding gun owners. Law-abiding gun owners. Individuals who own pistol braces, which were originally approved by the ATF themselves. What's changed? What's different? What's new? I'll tell you what's changed. What's changed is now we have an administration that is desperate to erode our Second Amendment rights in more and more pervasive ways as every year passes. It has continually chipped away at Americans' constitutional rights because of the lack of understanding of what the actual roots of gun violence are. The The administration is abusing the powers delegated to the ATF to illegally track gun owners, perform unauthorized compliance checks at people's homes, and now banning popular modifications that, again, I will say it again, they approved in the first place. It's got to stop. We're tired of it. Americans are tired of it. This has to end. That's why I am proud to join these efforts to protect gun owners across this great United States of America. As their duly elected representatives, we must fight back. We must stand tall. We must be tough and stand against this abuse of power on their behalf. And let me say this, as a duly elected official and a gun owner myself, all I have left to say to the ATF is enough is enough. Our right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you to my good friend from New Jersey, from one of those blue states where you don't necessarily think that there are passionate gun owners, and I appreciate those words.
South Jersey's a lot different.
All right.
Thank you.
Now I would like to yield 3 minutes to my good friend from Colorado, Representative Boebert, who is also the co-chair of our Second Amendment caucus here in Congress.
Mr. Speaker, first I'd like to thank my friend and fellow Freedom Caucus colleague and proven fighter for the Second Amendment, Mr. Clyde, for organizing this special order. Thank you so much for highlighting what's going on here. Mr. Speaker, the ATF's new pistol brace rule violates the separations of powers. Bureaucrats don't create laws. Congress does. This rule functions like a law that Congress never passed. ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. In Western Colorado, we call that a fun weekend. But DC bureaucrats have used this agency to infringe on the rights of the American people. When you research how many pistol braces the ATF expects to be registered, the number varies. Some say 10 million, others say 20 million, and it's still may even be 40 million. Why such disparity? Because the ATF doesn't know how many are out there, because law-abiding Americans do not trust them enough to tell them. In fact, there's probably going to be many more boating accidents this spring and summer than we've ever encountered in U.S. history from law-abiding gun owners. We don't trust the ATF because of their overreaching actions, exactly like we're seeing with this rule. There's been a lot of talk about defunding the ATF, even abolishing the agency altogether. And I'm still waiting to hear a good reason why the ATF should remain an agency at all. And yet I've yet to hear one. Instead of providing regulations that keep our communities safe, this agency has made our communities more dangerous by laundering weapons to the cartels. Operation Fast and Furious exposed the recklessness of the ATF, how little regard they have for the rule of law, and Americans have had a hard time viewing these agencies and its rules as legitimate. Think about it. The ATF had about 1,700 firearms that were being tracked. They had tracers on them that they were selling to known criminals during this Operation Fast and Furious. They lost 1,700 traced firearms. And now they expect to go after law-abiding American citizens for firearm accessories? Are they really that competent to go after this many millions of Americans for a firearm accessory, a stabilizing brace, when they had 1,700 tracked firearms in the hands of known criminals that they just lost? I think that alone proves the legitimacy of this agency, and I'm very excited to bring them into the Oversight and Accountability hearing so they could speak for themselves of why they should remain an agency in our federal government and not have the appropriate features of their agency put under another, like the FBI. once we clean that out. But other than that, the Second Amendment, it is absolute. All the regulations that bureaucrats make, the laws that bureaucrats are trying to make, the unconstitutional laws that are passed by the federal government, the state legislatures, they make our country less safe. Gun-free zones are the most dangerous places in our country. The Second Amendment is absolute, and it's here to stay. A recent report states that Americans own 46% of the world's guns. I think we need to get our numbers up, boys and girls. I thank you so much, Mr. Clyde, for hosting this special order. Thank you for bringing us all together on this topic, and hopefully we could shed some light to the American people and let them know that we are fighting against this agency and their abuse of separation of powers. Thank you, and I yield.
Thank you. Thank you to the gentlewoman from Colorado and her unwavering defense of the Second Amendment of our Constitution. And now I would like to yield 3 minutes to my good friend from Texas, Mr. Crenshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Clyde. Thank you for your leadership on this important issue, because the unelected bureaucrats, they're at it again. They're launching attacks on our constitutional rights of law-abiding gun owners. And this seems to be the sole purpose of the agency lately, attacking the Second Amendment. Now they want to ban pistol braces. Now, Americans who don't know what a pistol brace is might have some obvious questions after hearing about this ban. What is a pistol brace? Obviously, it makes guns more deadly, right? It makes guns shoot faster, makes them want to be used only by people who murder other people. Why else would the ATF want to ban it? But Americans who actually use pistol braces know the reality. There is zero logical reason to ban pistol braces. It's a device used by a lot of disabled veterans, a lot of people I know, to provide more stability when shooting a gun. Tens of millions of Americans own this brace, but they would immediately become felons when this goes into effect. That's not even practical from a law enforcement perspective. Now, you could argue, actually, that the pistol brace makes the gun safer, makes it less likely for people to shoot things they are not aiming at. But no, the impulsive leaders at ATF have once again failed to apply simple logic and reason to their decision-making, and instead chose to apply the mindset of an authoritarian, gun-grabbing bureaucrats we all know that they are. Now, Congress cannot sit idly by. I recently reintroduced a bipartisan piece of legislation that would create an appeals process for small business owners hurt by these haphazard rulings. Right now, the only real recourse that exists is for these gun shop owners and manufacturers to sue the federal government in court. Now, for the average American, that's not exactly doable. It takes time and a lot of money and a lot of resources. My bill would put the ATF in line with every other federal regulatory agency's appeal process and ensure Americans can petition their government for the redress of grievances and get decisions handed down in a timely manner. These taxpayer-funded anti-gun activists at the ATF cannot continue to trample on our Second Amendment rights without a response from Congress. We must never cease fighting against these shameless power grabs, and Republicans must use our House majority to protect law-abiding gun owners. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you to my good friend from Texas for those inspiring words, and I will now yield 3 minutes to my good friend from Kentucky, Representative Massey.
I want to thank Mr. Clyde from Georgia for organizing this time on the floor. I think it's so important. We're talking about the brace ruling from the ATF. A brace is a firearm accessory for disabled individuals. But I'm sure Biden went to his Attorney General and to the ATF and said, you know what, I hate guns. How can I take millions of them off the street without regard for if they're legally owned? And how can I do it without going to Congress? Because I really don't want to do that. Now, keep in mind, this is administrative law.
Right.
Our founders were against this type of thing because they knew that the laws shouldn't change with each administration. When Democrats controlled both chambers of Congress and the White House, they didn't pass this legislation. This ATF rule says that gun owners have 120 days of amnesty to register or destroy their firearm if it has this firearm accessory. If you don't obey, you become a felon. What this administrative rule does not do is it does not make people safer. This ruling turns millions of law-abiding gun owners into criminals. Tens of millions of pistol braces have been sold in the United States with the permission of the ATF, the written permission of the ATF. They're telling you to take this off or transfer it or register it like a machine gun, basically the same paperwork. If you want to turn it into a short barrel rifle, guess what? There's 26% of Americans live in a state where the ATF has left them with no option. They will create an illegal gun in their state if they comply with the ATF ruling in order to keep their gun. How much compliance do we think there's going to be? Well, there was a bump stock rule similar to this. There are about 500,000 bump stocks estimated in circulation. 526 have been returned to the government. So they've made 500,000 felons, is what they've done. Now, Mr. Clyde has several bills to fix this. I can anticipate, or I believe, Justice Scalia, if he were alive, I can tell you, I believe, based on a meeting that I had with him, which one he would prefer. Several of us had breakfast with Scalia, and we said, oh, Obama's so bad, and we don't have the constitutional balance of government. Fix this for us, Supreme Court. And Scalia said, this is not my job to referee fights between you and the executive branch. By the way, you're the most powerful branch. You're Article 1. Right. And you have all the tools you need to stop what he's doing. And one of my colleagues said, well, impeachment's so hard. Scalia said, I'm not talking about impeachment. You are funding everything you complain about. Right. So I believe that his favorite method here, and it's certainly my favorite method, would have been to defund this activity. The ruling is unconstitutional. The Second Amendment is clear. Shall not be infringed means shall not be infringed. I urge all Americans to call their representatives and support Andrew Clyde's bill. And I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you to my good friend from Kentucky. And he's absolutely right. We have the power of the purse. Now I would like to yield 2 minutes to my good friend from Texas, Representative Weber.
I thank the gentleman from Georgia for yielding to me, and thank you for your efforts in leading this fight. Let's get something straight. I'm a proud Texan, and let me tell you, Texans are not happy when the government comes after their Second Amendment right. My District 14 on the Gulf Coast of Texas has more concealed handgun licensees than any other congressional district in Texas, and I have to assume in the country, for that matter. The Second Amendment is extremely clear, quote, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What's so hard to understand about that? But let's face it, folks, the far left's dangerous attack on the United States Constitution continues unabated with yet another example right here with the ATF's unconstitutional pistol brace rule, which bans millions of firearms with stabilizing braces. The ATF ruling could turn as many as 40 million Americans into felons, and those 40 million Americans are sick and tired of faceless bureaucrats trying to destroy the Second Amendment. Mr. Speaker, Thomas Jefferson once said, where the people fear the government, there's tyranny. Where the government fears the people, there's liberty. I would add, Mr. Speaker, fear the government that fears your guns. I want to thank the gentleman from Georgia. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you to my good friend from Texas for those great words. And he's absolutely correct. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. So now I'd like to yield 2 minutes to my good friend from Florida, Matt Gaetz.
I thank the gentleman for his leadership and for yielding. The ATF's new rule, criminalizing pistol braces, is a brazen and unlawful attempt to usurp congressional authority. This pistol brace rule will fail for the same reason the bump stock rule failed. The ATF does not have the authority to create federal law. Nobody voted for the ATF, though I know a lot of people who would vote against them if they could. This new rule will ban pistol braces on certain firearms, forcing users to jump through numerous hoops to comply with this new decree or risk becoming a felon. Disabled veterans and others have used these braces for years to help them fire pistols, and the ATF has unilaterally decided that this is no longer acceptable. Now, otherwise law-abiding Americans will either have to destroy their newly illegal firearms or figure out how to comply with an arbitrary and confusing regulatory scheme outlined in the National Firearms Act. The ATF cannot be trusted to protect our rights to keep and bear arms. There is no timeline in which the ATF, under any administration, would become an ally. It needs to go. We need to abolish the ATF before they abolish our Second Amendment rights. Alcohol, tobacco, and firearms should be the name of a chain of convenience stores in Florida, not a federal agency. I urge every red-blooded American and every conservative in this Congress to stand with Representative Clyde and his legislation and to stand with me and co-sponsor my bill, the Abolish the ATF Act of 2023. Let's get rid of this unlawful agency once and for all, and let this special order be considered a shot across the bow. I yield back to the gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you to my good